Welcome to About You. I'm Connie Hogan. Well, my show today returns to my original focus, or the usual focus, which is the area of philanthropy. In my many years with General Motors Foundation, I grew to be so fond of the many stellar organizations around town that are great philanthropic organizations, and one of those is Big Brothers Big Sisters of Southeastern Michigan. I have as my guest Jennifer Spitler, formerly of Big Brothers Big Sisters of Washtenaw County, and now there's been a merger. And Jennifer's going to talk about her own career as well as all the many exciting things with the Big Brothers Big Sisters of Southeastern Michigan, right? Southeast. Okay, yes. I was adding the Southeast.
Right.
Jennifer, welcome to About
Thank
You.
you. Thanks for having me.
So let's start. I like to start with you, like when you were little Jennifer. Just what, 20 years ago, 10 years ago?
Yes.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
10 years ago.
Yes.
So where are you from? Where'd you go to college in Eastern Michigan?
I did go to Eastern. I'm from Worcester, Ohio. So I'm a
Oh,
transplant.
oh my God.
Do you know Worcester?
I know Worcester because, and we don't want to get into this, but they have that theater down there.
Oh yeah, the Ohio Light Opera and
the Light Opera.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So grew up in Ohio. Found myself in Michigan. Cousins came to college and followed them here.
That's what I was.
Was just really, and it's my home. I've been here since I was 18 years old. So
me too.
Yeah, and it was just a couple of years ago, like you said.
Yes, right. Right.
But just wanted to do something different and kind of leave the nest. 3 hours was a perfect.
Oh, that is. Yeah.
It's perfect,
it is,
right?
Yeah.
Far enough, close enough.
It is.
Yeah.
So you went to Eastern, and then you've been in this philanthropic space for quite a while. I know I was kind of teasing because, around the area, all the philanthropic organizations, they tend, it's like musical chairs. That's what we used to say, the club. It was so much fun. But they do such great work. But you've been with this one for how long?
I celebrated 22 years in August of this year.
Now that includes Washtenaw.
That was, since I've been with Big Brothers Big Sisters.
I got it.
Yeah, so it wasn't something I planned. I certainly did not plan to stake, put my roots in and stick, but the mission stuck. It's easy. I think it's easy to stick. I love it. I couldn't imagine being anywhere else. And so
that's a great resounding review.
It took a minute. It wasn't first. It was not my first job. I had several other positions, and I didn't think. I'm a social worker by trade, so went to school, got my my undergrad and my master's degree in social work. Thought I wanted to do a little bit more like policy work, like I'd end up in DC or something. Like this just was not running program, and community-based work was just not where I thought I'd be. But once I was there, once you start developing relationships and you see the impact of your work, I just feel like, at least for me, it's hard to conceive of leaving kind of that space.
I know exactly what you mean, because I had started, when I was talking about myself, in the policy area. We had a staff in GM, it's called Industry Government Relations, just because they didn't want it to be GM and the government. But we worked on policy, but then we spun off with Debbie Dingle to the GM Foundation. Once you get into the community programs, it's just a lot more fun. It's a lot more rewarding.
Yeah. Well, and I think the thing, it's also, for me, we've always had interns. So we've always had students from the different universities. And talking to them about the impact of, in social work, we call it the micro, meso, and macro levels, right? They all impact each other. Just because I thought I was going to be doing, the bigger macro level work, I still have to. I still have to do interpersonal work. I'm still working in community. So you get that feel, you can, I think I've been fortunate with Big Brothers Big Sisters. In Washtenaw, we were a smaller agency than obviously the Metro Detroit agency prior to the merge, but my job changed constantly. Right? Like one year maybe I was heavy development and I had a program director, and sometimes we wouldn't have a program director and I'd run program because I'm a social work, and I'd have a development director. So we spun off. We were a sponsored organization initially, and then we became a 501c3, and I went through that process. I had amazing board members who taught me how to read balance sheets and how to create budgets and how to do the things that I needed to do to run this business. And they became my mentors, right? Like that.
Well,
I've been
so
really
important.
fortunate. I've been very fortunate. And I think the more that I have been able to look back to who my mentors were, not only as a young person, as a teenager, and then as a young professional.
It's funny to get that perspective, isn't it?
It's weird.
Then you really look at it
yeah.
and how it all kind of, and sometimes I'm sure you do it too, but it's like you look and you think, wow, that could so easily not have happened that way. Where
yeah.
things did happen, or maybe the vice versa, but it's like the opportunities were just amazing. I know with me, like I was in finance, if you can believe it.
Oh,
I was in accounting with General Motors, which, oh my God.
Well, I thought I was going to be an accountant until I was in 10th grade. Like that's
what they were pushing for women.
Well, I love numbers. So I love spreadsheets. I'm the social worker that likes spreadsheets.
I do too. So do I. In some ways,
formulas.
More so. I do
and
too.
All that stuff. Yeah.
Because one thing that is good about that world, it's black and white, and you don't have quite as much politics.
Yeah.
As you would get in our world, the philanthropic world. It's wonderful. It does so much, but man, is there drama.
Little less subjective.
Everywhere, everywhere. Look, it's like Beverly Hills Housewives. It's the same thing.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
But yeah, so now let's talk about. Well, let's start with saying why did they merge? I assume it was just for economies of scale, so to speak.
Economies of scale. Kind of. I think COVID was not easy.
Oh, I didn't know
so
that.
Our merge was official last August.
Right, I knew it was so recent.
And about 2 years, a year and a half prior to that, beginning of 22, the Detroit CEO had left and the program director had left, and they said, "Will you step in interim?" Okay. We had just started having some conversations about coming out of COVID, economies of scale, and those pieces. And I stepped in. I straddled both roles for about a year and a half.
Wow.
I'm tired. I mean, I'm enthused. I love my work, but I'm tired. And we had some things. I'm sorry. I hope that didn't. I touched the microphone while you looked down. I hope that didn't throw anybody off. But there were some things in Washtenaw County that I think we were good at. And had some good kind of structure, organizational mechanisms in place. And I think there were some things in the Metro Detroit agency that they were good at, and the history and kind of the organizational pieces that they brought to the table, and they balanced each other.
Oh, okay.
We had stronger kind of individual donor line items in our budget, and had really a more robust individual donor kind of plan in Detroit, had a very corporate donor plan and organization. And so how do we bring these together, leverage it? The other piece was, if you think about Washtenaw ending, right, kind of at the Canton-Plymouth border, and Detroit, although Wayne County goes that far, right?
Yeah.
Really serving, though, the 75 corridor.
Okay.
Right? Like there's a lot of service that happens and up through Detroit, Southfield, Pontiac. Detroit wasn't really touching some of those I call them out county, that out county area. We couldn't move into that area, but there's so many resources that we could develop, not only companies, but potential volunteers, just relationships in that area, that 275 corridor. So we saw it as kind of a untapped, that if we were together, we would kind of do a better job serving that area and building relationships there too.
Now, I just thought of this as you're talking. I think you guys are a recipient from United Way, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because I know I used to handle the GM with United Way, but I kind of used to know all and it was a pretty big one in United Way, I think, right? Fairly good. I mean, one of the key organizations, I guess.
Yes.
We would get that mixed up with Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and Boys and Girls Clubs.
You're not the only. Everyone does.
Oh my gosh.
I just cash the checks. That's what I say.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's something. So they recently merged as well, right? Just before us, the Washtenaw and
yes, and I won't get into this story, but years and years ago, it was called United Way for Southeastern Michigan. Then it changed to a couple of things, and it's back to the original now. That's why I always say Southeastern Michigan.
That's so
but we're talking about like the mid-90s, and then it changed over several things.
Wow.
And it's just, I mean, that the whole United Way thing, it's wonderful, but it's amazing, the model, given, I used to say this even then, it's like you go in and you can give money to whatever organization with a click of a button. It's like to maintain their relevance. Hats off to them that they have, because they're still big.
It's really interesting, and I've thought about this a lot over the years, right? Like, we used to do so many more campaigns with United Way, out talking to the community, and they were our entree, right, to really getting
That's why I mentioned it,
other organizations, companies to know the organizations that they were serving, or that United Way was funding through the campaigns. But now so many companies have their own internal, right? They're using, Benevity or whatever these other streams are.
And it's so easy.
It's so easy. And I do think that donors are maybe, I think donors are more savvy than they used to be, and they just kind of relied on the United Way to know who the organizations were. They wanted their dollars to go to a good place. Yeah, the vetting. Where now, I mean, it's probably the internet that created it, right? You can go to the organization's website,
100%.
you can learn about them, the transparency, and you can click the button and make the donation.
It was for my particular time in history that I did that you would not believe.
Yeah.
Because long story short, we were under pressure to still bring in. There was huge competition between GM, Ford, and Chrysler.
Yep.
And I even now when I drive through Dearborn and I see the Ritz-Carlton, the old Ritz-Carlton, it's like we would have those events, and I thought that somebody might just run me out of town because it was like we had a hard time, comparing to Ford. Ford has got all those facilities down there. We didn't have all those people. Ours are in Texas and Georgia and whatever. But anyway, that's a whole story. The point was we started to bring in some other competitive organizations, and we were under fire for that. It was Nature Conservancy, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. There was a few of them. But so just to keep that money in United Way that came, which was the old school, going back to the 80s and prior. But anyway, we're getting off track. Talk more about the mission and the vision for your organization.
So, I'm one of those people who honestly, I feel the mission and the vision. I am not, I tell the staff all the time, I can't put it into words. I don't say it. I never say it. I probably should. But the mission is about supporting kids becoming all that they can be, right?
That's a great way to say it.
Supporting kids, path to graduate from high school. How do we support them through that? How do we get them to that next stage in their life, whatever it might be? It is hard out there, right? It's
I can't imagine with all we just talked about.
I have no idea. I can barely manage it sometimes, and when you're trying to figure out who you are and how you want to live in the world and how you want to contribute and how you need to get by and all of those things, it's just important to have people in your life that are not family, I think. Family is great. You can have all of the folks that support you, and love you and care about you, but we all know that when we're hitting those ages where peer relationships become so much more important, and that used to be, I think, high school. It's now moved into middle school, late elementary, and the way that just culture has shifted, probably again because of the internet and phones and social media and all of those things. To have a person give you a perspective,
the mentor, the adult
that is not
mentor,
your parents.
It's perfect, yeah.
It's just different. You listen to those folks different, or at least what they have to say. Are you going to agree with it? Are you going to still pick your own path and do what you're going to do? But we know that it's so important, right? That those peer relationships and how kids push and pull to figure out who they are and who they're we adults need to walk with them. And I think about it as that. It's a walk, right? It might be a season. It might be forever, right? Our relationships that we make at Big Brothers, Big Sisters, we ask for at least a year commitment.
Okay, that was my next
We have our average match length is several years.
Okay.
I have been here for 22 years, and there are matches and kids that I have watched grow.
That's amazing.
I've watched them have their own children, and blossom and do their thing in life. So some relationships do just last a season. And one of the things that I think is also really important about that is we have to learn how to have healthy goodbyes and how to have healthy separation.
Okay.
And that's something that can happen in relationships like big brothers, big sisters, right? Like the world doesn't work exactly the way you want it to. Things don't always go how do you get over some of those things? How do you learn to live? How do you find the glass half full as opposed to glass half empty? But we talk about closure in match relationships at the beginning of enrollment for volunteers and for families, because it's an important element. This might not be forever. This might be for a season. And if we all look back on our lives, we all know that there are people that were in our lives for a season that made a significant difference. Mm-hmm. Some, a semester, some a year, some 5 years, and some forever. So, relationships at Big Brothers Big Sisters look different. The longevity looks different. We got a donation check today from a gentleman who I think he has to be in his 90s. I don't know. He said he had mentored this young person in the 80s.
Oh, wow.
And unfortunately, and it was his little, and unfortunately he had passed away. And he was writing a donation check in his honor.
Oh, wow.
And I was just thinking to myself, they stayed connected all these years.
That's amazing.
All these years.
So I know I see the term juvenile justice system, because you have the adults who volunteer, and I assume you have a database of that. Yep. And then how do you get your clients,
young people,
kids?
Yep.
Yes,
yep.
yeah.
So it can happen in 2 different ways.
Okay.
Well, it can probably happen in more than 2 ways. But we have school-based programming and we have community-based programming. Okay. In the school-based programming, it's typically referred by the teacher, social worker, someone in the school.
Okay.
Right?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Makes that referral because we bring the volunteers to the school to provide the mentorship.
Okay.
Right? And then in the community-based program, it's all self-referral. Parents call us. They have a friend, they have a cousin, they heard of it because they had a big, and they wanted to get their child involved in the program.
So it's pretty much open for someone that thinks or knows they don't have to have a criminal record or anything. No. It's just they need help, guidance.
We're a prevention program.
Got it.
So, right, like when you think about that, and I always say it's not about, there is intervention that happens. The biggest kind of the intervention, right? Like that is the intervention in your life to some extent. But it is because what I said earlier, those peer relationships and how that changes for young people. So what we know trajectory-wise is that young people's risk factors, right, go up as they age, right? And they go through middle school and high school. What we want Big Brothers Big Sisters to do is have a volunteer that walks with them that keeps it here.
Okay.
Right? It's not an intervention that, a kid has to have touched the system, they have to be truant, no.
Okay.
What are the factors out there? Many of our families are single parent families, and so another person. I mean, it's hard. I did it with 2 people in the house, 2 adults in the house. Like that was difficult. If you're one parent in the house, like it is difficult to, spend the time, have the energy, right? So it's just another person for a young, for our kids. We have families who struggle with poverty. And I've always thought about Big Brothers Big Sisters being a program that really gives opportunity and experience, right? Kids many times live in a small block radius. If you do not have the means to go outside of that.
It's amazing.
And to experience that. You're not seeing what all the world has to offer you. Nowadays, it's a little different. You see it on TikTok. But is that where we want them to see it?
Exactly.
Right, all the time, right? Like, is everybody going to be a social media influencer? No. So how do we put people in kids' lives that give them opportunities to see things outside of their bubble with perspective and opportunities to get out there and do those things, try them. We did a little research a couple of years ago, it was a qualitative piece as opposed to, we do surveys and things that are much more quantitative, but it was to look at what was the most significant change that young people had in our program through their lens, through their parent guardian's lens, and through their BIG's lens. And when we did that every month for 3 months, and we asked specific questions about our outcome buckets, which are risk behaviors, educational success or attainment, and social emotional competence.
Okay.
So we asked that question of all 3 parties, and what was the most significant change you've seen? And once we took it all and we analyzed it all and we brought it up, it became the most significant change is that young people in Big Brothers Big Sisters are more likely to make positive risks. Try out for the team.
Okay.
Try out for the play. Do the thing you've never done before. They're trying things. They're not living in this, in this bubble.
It gave
in this
them the
radius.
confidence and
gives them the confidence to
opportunity,
do it.
yeah.
It gives them the opportunity to do it. So it creates like we wrap our arms around them in many different ways. The big one-on-one, and then the program with all of the things that we bring to the table
Right.
in terms of group events and activities
what
and
my next
partnerships.
question.
Yeah.
So you have, I assume, like a standard suggestions or whatever to the mentors.
Yes.
But now, and this is just a technical question, but like say that a mentor or an adult wanted to, what would I say? Take the kid to the Fox Theater or something to a show. They would pay for it, or
Yes.
would they? Okay.
Yes.
So that's part of the deal.
It is part of the deal, but
You
what
guys
we encourage a couple of things. We encourage free and low cost. This isn't about money spent.
Right.
But if you have the means, and that is, right, to give them that experience, absolutely. But we also have a lot of partnerships. We have partnership with the zoo, so our matches can go to the zoo.
do you?
We have
Okay.
partnerships with Henry Ford, so they're going to, you then go to Greenfield, there's
so then
different
it's
things.
fun for both the adult and the kid.
It's fun for
right?
both the adult
Yeah.
and the kid. And then we put on group events and activities. So we have companies that come to us and say,
Oh,
we want to
right. I
do
see,
something,
yeah.
but we don't, how do we do this? So in the last year, we've done some really cool things. The kids made mouse trap derby cars and raced
fun.
them.
Yeah.
So it was kind of it was a STEM experience, right? But it was also fun.
Okay.
The company came in and fed the kids, and they brought in some of their team to do this thing with the bigs and the littles. So they got to have those experiences. We do field trips. We go to the different museums. We celebrated Hispanic Heritage Month in November by
I
doing a
saw that
field
one.
trip to, there was a special installation at the DIA, and then we did some try different foods around Southwest, so
Yeah, there's so much great stuff in Southwest
so
Detroit,
much,
right?
yeah. So, we try to also provide those things through our partners
Okay, I
that
see,
that mitigate that cost for volunteers as much as we can, so that you always have different things that you can do through Big Brothers Big Sisters as well. Yeah.
So now, what do you have coming up? I know there were some things you talked about the Hispanic thing, and what are things you'd like to talk about in the near future?
We just have a lot. There's always something going on.
Big stuff, okay.
Really. We are, so as we move into 2025, we're wrapping up right now our Adopt a Family program, so we do holiday giving every year,
Okay.
where we have donors that, adopt families. Moving into January, it's National Mentoring Month, and during National Mentoring Month, we really have a big push for bringing volunteers through the door. We have about 200 kids on our wait list in that 4-county footprint. So we need them matched. They are primarily young boys, and they are boys of color.
Okay.
Looking for not always a volunteer that reflects that necessarily, but we do need men of color to step up as bigs as well. So in January, we're doing a mentor rally to recruit volunteers, to bring companies to the table, to think about how can you help us recruit volunteers? How might you partner to do some group events? And so we're doing that at the Durfee Center on the 28th, I believe it is, in January. And then, then we'll move into all of our other kind of group events and activities. We do a rec night every year that is, just a way to get folks together and burning some steam and energy in the cold, usually February month. And we focus on what we call reach and trying to provide activities for the matches that are recreational, educational, art and career, community service, or health and wellness. And so that's what we really think about when we're planning those activities through the year.
Okay, so you're talking about bigs and littles. You're
Yes.
talking about the bigs are the adults
The volunteers,
and the littles,
yep.
or not.
And then we have a fundraiser coming up in March as well, a great big auction, and that will be at the Cambria Hotel on the 20th of March. So that is a way that folks, again, if you don't have the time to be a big, and that not everybody does, but you have the treasure to support other people being the big, you know, you can come to that event and it's a
We'll take it,
fundraiser.
right,
Yeah, that helps support making those matches possible, making those relationships possible. It takes a lot of staff time and energy to make good matches, and we also have to ensure child safety. Right, that is a huge piece
I was going to say it's,
of what we
it's
do.
a little bit risky. I mean,
So we do check-in calls with the matches, and we do the group events so that we see the matches, and we do an enrollment and background check process. So all of that stuff costs money, and people have to do it. So we have to fundraise for those things as well.
So would you say, you said you had how many kids that were looking, 400 or
We have about 200 kids on the wait list.
So you have a shortage of volunteers.
We have a
now.
shortage of
Okay,
volunteers.
just to say it, okay.
Yep. Well, and it's really because we serve this footprint, right? It's about where the kids are and finding volunteers in the right zip codes and areas so that you're not having to drive an hour to pick a kid up. You know, that's a little much.
And you probably, I would imagine, you probably run into, I just thought of this, a problem, like if you just did like a reach out to someone like me or whoever, that, you know, like I would look at it and think, well, is that legitimate or is that a spam? You know what I mean? You probably run into that too. I mean, in terms of you're reaching out to the bigs.
Yes. Well, we try to be targeted and
Oh, okay.
intentional
Oh, that's
in
better,
either
yeah.
going to professional organizations or fraternities, sororities, companies, where we can come in and share our messaging so it kind of comes from a legit source, as opposed to we're not spamming folks' email or their text phones.
that's
you know,
just, oh my
we
God,
just got done with all of that, didn't we? Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be the next person blowing up everybody's phone. Well, I could blow up everybody's phone,
But in a good way.
In a
right?
good way. In a good way. Yeah.
So this, the January 28th event at the Durfee Center, that's where you're really trying to get potential
Yes.
people
Partners.
on both sides. Right?
Bigs and
Bigs and-
partners.
bigs and
folks,
littles, okay.
Yeah. Well, not littles.
Oh, little,
we
not
don't.
littles,
I mean,
right.
it's
bigs
not
and
that-
super bigs. Right?
Yes, bigs and super bigs. Be a super big.
Yeah, that's my idea, so I have to say that.
Okay. Be a super big. I love it.
The Connies and the GMs, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In which case would be
That's
both,
what it
right?
is, right?
That would
It's
be a good
partners.
example,
It
sure.
would be a really good example.
So that's January 28th. Do you have a good feel for a lot of people coming in, or
we are registering folks. I think registration opened last week or the week before. It's the holidays, so you know.
that's a hard time to.
But
that's a
I'm
hard
sure
time,
in
yeah.
January it'll kick into full gear. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you've got the Great Big Auction, March 20th.
March
Is
20th.
that Cambria? Where is that?
It's downtown Detroit.
Oh, downtown. Okay.
Yep, yep.
I was thinking that was Macomb County.
No, it's right downtown Detroit.
Okay.
So that'll be it's sports themed. So
Okay.
you can come out and meet some people and support a great cause.
I like those events. I miss those so much.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know. We'll have
yeah.
to look those up. Okay, we're coming down to the time frame. So, is there any other things you want to talk about, just to leave our audience with a summary of? I mean, it's hard to boil it down because it's such a great organization.
You know, I think that sum it up, it's simple, right? It's a little bit of time. And it might
For
be
a big impact.
For a big impact. For what it can be and all that it can be, that relationship and what you get out of it as a big.
It's awesome, yeah.
It's much more than you're giving. We see it time and time again. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll hopefully do a follow-up at some point. And
Great.
Not that you're a new organization getting started, but it's interesting. I do that with some of my guests to say, so this happened, and from the time we were here before.
We'll do a merge update of where we are.
Right, maybe a merge again.
It's been a whole thing, right? Merging's not easy.
Oh
so
my gosh.
We're just kind of coming out of that season a year later. And so it is time, in my mind, it's time for us to fly.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Jennifer, and best
Thank
of
you.
luck
Thank
to
you, Connie.
you and Big Brother. I almost said boys, girls, but
know.
Big Brothers, Big Sisters.
Yeah.
Thanks again,
you.
and thanks for watching today.